I have a couple of questions for each of the panelists, and then we'll open it up to all of your questions. My first question is for Genine. I'm going to kind of order this in terms of the process of making a film. And since Genine is working with Harvard Square scriptwriters, I have this question for you, which is, how can a writer improve their craft so they can get their work sold and seen?
Improve their craft.
How can they create projects that are going to actually get sold and seen?
Gosh, it's almost like there's improving your craft, and then there's something, you know what I'm going to say, right? And that is, you could have the best screenplay in the world or pilot, and then there's the question of how do you get it to the people who could make it a cinematic reality. And I almost think they're two different questions. So I'll just say first, we run an organization. We meet every week, Monday nights in Harvard Square, and we review scripts, and they could be anything: stage plays, pilots, feature films, you name it, really, outlines even, and treatments. And our goal is to help people to get their scripts ready, actually to be seen by the world. And by that, to try to answer your question, that means they're formatted properly, they have good act structure, they have good pacing, they have high appeal, they are, and this is where we get into a really tricky thing, they have marketability. I think that for, Harvard Square Scriptwriters has been around for 31 years, and I think for many of those years, people were writing opuses, their one darling, and then they were rewriting, and it wasn't really, at that time, the organization wasn't dealing very much with how do you make something that you can actually sell. So we focus a lot more on what is the marketplace looking for, and are you creating something that is going to fit into some market, whether it's indie or a studio or whatever. So I hope that answers some of your question. And then I think we should save the other part as to how do you get to people for later.
Okay, sounds good. We want to pass it down to Nancy, maybe? We might kind of split this up and go back and forth, maybe, so everyone gets a chance to talk. What does it mean to have a festival strategy? How does one do that?
Well, it is a long process just making a film, and then you realize you have another summit to climb at the end of that. And part of what you want to do by getting into film festivals is build audiences, not just for that particular film, but for your future films. And that's something that you have to realize, is that you're brand building. And it sounds a terrible thing to say, but it is true. So everyone thinks in terms of film festivals, in terms of sort of the bigger festivals like Sundance or, Toronto or Telluride, maybe Cannes. And you should reach for that, but kind of temper your expectations. Very few people, especially on their first try, is going to get into those festivals. There's very limited space. And then you need to sort of build a team to help you with your film festival strategy. You need to make sure that you have materials ready to go that help to promote your film, and that you need to have really honest assessments about what your film is and who it appeals to, and then start to look for credible festivals, and it can help you build audiences around sort of the demographics that your film will appeal to. And don't ever forget your local audience, and don't miss your deadlines, because that's really important. While you're trying to get into Sundance, you may have missed the opportunity to get into a bunch of smaller festivals that may not seem as important, but will help you in the long run by helping you network, because it does create an opportunity to meet with other filmmakers, and that experience is really invaluable.
Can I follow up just with a question, because I think this comes up a lot with filmmakers thinking, how do I play this game where I only have one world premiere, one national premiere, one each state premiere, and thinking that through and knowing how high to reach and then where to really depending on the film. Do you have advice on kind of thinking that through or planning for that?
You do definitely have to plan your ideal premiere, because the larger festivals do require premiere status.
Right.
But here's the thing. A lot of regional festivals don't require anything more than area premieres.
Right.
So you can do some negotiations on that. And in some places, you know, if it is your hometown festival, you can kind of play around with the politics of it and make it a, you know, work in progress screening, and so that you're not actually giving your premiere away, and be able to offer that to a festival that is in sort of that top tier of festivals. But most festivals want to help you build audiences and want to help you connect your film to audiences in their area. Because if they're not doing that, that's really not what a film festival is supposed to do. If they're like really going to elbow you about like world premiere, then maybe you should see how the experiences of other filmmakers at that festival have been.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Clemence?
Sorry. I also wanted to give you the maybe the angle of the distributor for film
Thank
festival. So yes, if you have a film, you should aim first at the big market, because that's where actually your film can be bought also by a sales agent, and then the sales agent will buy the film, will sell the film to the distributor. So if you really have a film that you believe in and you know that there is potential, you really should go for the big festivals. And then that means also, if you have requests from the local film festival, unfortunately, you might have to put that on hold and not be too excited about the whole thing. Then, okay, this doesn't work. There is still a lot of local film festivals that are extremely good with helping your film to be bought by a distributor or by a sales agent. One that, invite distributors. So you have, I'm not going to tell you everything, but there is the San Francisco Film Festival, the Mill Valley Film Festival on the West Coast. You have Seattle Film Festival that is really good. You have Salem, for documentaries, you have the Salem Film Festival in Massachusetts. You have also Silver Docs that is extremely good for documentaries. I don't know how many documentary filmmakers are here, but that's a very good one that require exclusivity also. Then you have in New York, you have also great film festivals like the Tribeca Film Festival, but also if you have a film with a certain topic, Gay and Lesbian Film Festival, you could also have very strategic positioning there. A Jewish topic film festival is really a good way to market your film also. But you have to be careful. You don't want to, if you think that your film has a chance to be bought by a distributor, you do not want to overplay the film at film festival, because film festivals are a very good way for distributors to make money. They charge a rental fee. Actually, I think that if you self-distribute your film, you can actually sometimes negotiate also a screening fee, even if you don't have a distributor. But with a distributor, it's easier to have a revenue that is added to the screening of the film. So if a distributor likes the film, but he sees that you have shown the film in 35 Jewish film festival, he's not going to be interested, because it's already like almost probably $35,000 of revenue that he's not going to get. So that's really tricky. You really have to know what you want at the end, to know your expectation, and then proceed accordingly.
All right, I'm going to come back to some of that, but Cirina, I want to see if you want to add to some of that, because I know that you also have a good deal of experience in working with festivals, and what's your take on all of that?
I think you're both really right. 40 years ago, it's been 40 years, I can't even believe it. 40 years ago, when we were just starting Sundance, there weren't a lot of film festivals. And actually people said, why do you want another film festival? There's already one in Texas. And I think over the years, and I have an absolute love for Sundance, but I think it's changed. When we first started it, we built it as a way to build a bridge between people who could not communicate with the executives in Hollywood and in the major metropolitan areas. we wanted to give what we were then calling regional filmmakers who were making $75,000 movies in their garages on their parents' credit cards a way to meet with executives that they normally wouldn't be able to have a chance to do. Now, when you go to Sundance, there is an A list, a B list, and a C list, which we were trying to avoid in the very beginning. I'm not being critical. It's just gotten so big that there just isn't room for everybody. And some of the people that we were trying to help in the very beginning need to start going to some of the regional festivals or find some other way of perhaps getting some notice. It has become huge. It's just huge, which lowers your chances as an independent of getting your film in, which is exactly what we were trying to avoid when we first started it. So we're going to have to figure out a way, all of us as filmmakers, of getting around all of that and having our product seen in a marketplace that's going to be viable for us. So I totally agree with what both of you said. And that is not to say I don't love Sundance. I do, and all the other festivals. The Berlinale is an amazing festival. It's a festival that's about film and any kind of film. They have so many films that are shown there, literally hundreds and hundreds of films, that might be an avenue if you want to go the festival route. We'll talk about international later, but I think you guys are both really right on to listen to them.
And I have another thing is that even if you do not have a film ready, you should go to film festival, local film festival, and network. There's a lot of panel discussions. There is a way to meet a lot of other filmmakers, maybe meet people who can help you finance your film. So that's really important that you go with maybe an idea or a project, and maybe that's a way to spend your vacation.
Just on the side, I do have some friends that went to Sundance this year to try to meet and greet and show their film, and they actually ended up leaving because they couldn't get into the big parties. But they did have an amazing meeting on the fly with an executive at one of the major companies that they happened to meet in line. And before they left Sundance, they showed them some clips, and now that company is really interested in picking up their film. So you never know when you're going to meet the right person. If it's meant to be, it will happen. Promise you.
And I want to second that, Genine. I have a question for you next. But that at even festivals that you might not expect. I mean, ITV Fest, Philip is here from there, and amazing industry people come out for that festival in Vermont, and where you might least expect it, right? And it's a great way to network, and it's low key, but you're in an environment where you're actually able to like have a drink with someone and see them face to face at a party, because it hasn't gotten to the point where you're no longer invited to the party. So, Genine, let me ask you, one of the things, there's people in the audience here, not everyone is a filmmaker necessarily. I know there's some actors here, there's audio engineers, there's, people of all different types, and many people are thinking about how to improve their career, how to build a business, how to, kind of take it up a notch. You've been an independent producer for a long time, and so give us some of the things that you've done. How do you strategize on what projects to take on and what projects to let go?
Well, I wanted to connect this verse to the whole film festival question, because I think what you see with film festivals is, yes, there's the Torontos, there's the Sundances, there's the Tribecas, etc. But we need to acknowledge also that there's a lot of emerging filmmakers who have no track record and have very little money, who are out making really interesting films. Maybe they're just shorts. And it is not generally realistic for those people to think that they're going to get into those festivals. If you look, for example, at Film Freeway, one of the major portals by which you submit film, there are something like 4,000 film festivals on there looking for films. If you look, for example, I was at Athena last week. For the shorts alone, they had almost 1,500 submissions, and they chose 16 to show. So, and that's nothing compared with the number, as you already mentioned, of number of submissions of shorts and features submitted to something like Sundance. I can tell you I've judged a lot of film festivals, and for example, I'm judging women in comedy shorts right now. Again, very specific. They are looking for original material. And the payoff out the other end is some amount of money, but not huge, and a connection with an industry pro, Paul Feig, or I forget, the head of comedy at HBO. So what you see is an enormous amount of content being made by people in an attempt to get any kind of foothold in the door. It's never, I don't think, been more competitive. So as you mentioned, and I want to second this, I think it's a mistake for many emerging filmmakers to shoot for Sundance and all the restrictions of, it has to be a premiere. Shoot for something you might actually get into and make connections, professional connections with, and then work from there to develop a greater base. So that was not the question you asked me.
That is a really good point, and I think that, you know, I've heard people, I can't remember who said this, but you have to know as a filmmaker, what is your goal? Is it to get as many people to see your film as possible? Is it to make money? Or is it to, what was the third one?
I don't know.
Change the world, maybe.
Change the world, right.
But you know, I mean, if your goal is exposure and just to get as many people, you could have a screening at a really prominent film festival, and there could be almost no one there. And you could screen at a smaller film festival and have a packed theater where you're really engaging with an audience who cares about the topic of your film. And that could be more advanced, you know, that could help advance the cause that you're trying to promote and your filmmaking career. I know I screened my film at IFFBoston, and it was one of the most well-composed screenings, totally packed, that I've ever seen, because they really put a lot of thought into how these films come together and that they have some connection, and it was really enjoyable, you know. And so it so depends on the film and what your goal with the film is. Knowing that is the first step. Don't deceive yourself into thinking that you're going to become a Hollywood filmmaker, but really what you want to do is make these like eccentric shorts. That's me. Okay, so what was the question about building a business?
Okay, so my personal view is that the greatest creative avenue that filmmakers can get into who want to do narrative is television. So where does that leave you in New England when the vast majority of television is being done in LA, and with a small amount in New York? And I think we're doing one television show, the production, but not the creative here, Castle Rock. So if you want to get into television, which is the change that I have made in my own personal career, I had to really begin to learn about something I knew nothing about. I have no idea how many people in this audience have interest in working in that, but I can tell you that it's a tough road if you live in New England. You have to figure out a way to connect with people in the gigantic, I mean, I brought statistics with me about the billions of dollars, 16 billion Netflix has committed to content creation. 1 billion, right, Apple has committed. Amazon, 4.5 billion in this year alone on developing new content. So you look at that, and you look at these incredible, groundbreaking shows that I'm constantly, in my not free time, binging on, and you say, how can I get a piece of that puzzle? How can I get even access to those people? And so that is my personal challenge, and I can only tell you that I personally decided to find some investors, invest some of my own money to make a pilot, which I'll be shooting around here. And that was a big decision for me personally. My background is corporate, industrial, documentary, very safe. I have a client, they pay the bills, and I deliver the product. And I have very little creative say, and that was true for most of my career. I made what other people wanted. So that's my change. That's my journey. I have no idea about what other people here have to say. And I'm happy to talk more about that and the challenges of that, but maybe give someone else a turn.
Cirina, do you want to speak to that a little bit in terms of the idea of, launching your own business? You have a business for what you do, and how does that work? How did you decide to do that, and what does that mean to build a business?
You know what's really exciting? The geographical boundaries are disappearing. they're literally disappearing. We're living in an age where people in Hollywood are talking about, how am I going to collaborate remote with my team? It almost doesn't matter where you live. People never know what continent I'm on. They really don't.
You have the connection, right? You have to have the connection.
Maybe not. I don't know. I'm encouraging everybody to do what they love no matter where they live. Because if you tell a good story, if you tell a really good story, it will find its home. You just have to persevere. And I was talking with you prior to I believe it was with Genine, right? I was talking with you about, I meet a lot of filmmakers and they want to meet the Steven Spielbergs of the world. And when I talk in groups like this, I really say to you, the people that are most important are the ones that are sitting right next to you. Because those are the ones that are living their lives in similar ways. Those are the ones that understand your ups and downs. And those are the ones that are going to help you as you move along. And yes, you do need connections, but I don't have connections with everything. The business is changing. The business model is not what it was 10 years ago. And you guys are right. So we have the film festival route. We have the networking route, which you actually talked about in your materials about this. And we're all going to get together for a few minutes afterwards and network and meet each other and figure out how we can help each other. When I first started out, I didn't know anyone. I knew no one. And everybody told me, I had worked on teams that made small movies in Utah, and I had been on the film commission, and then we started Sundance. But by that time, I hate to tell you how old I was, but everybody said, you're too old, you're a woman, you're not in any of the guilds, why are you going to LA, you'll never find a job, and that's just not the way it happened. I was stubborn enough and persevering enough to say, this is what I really want. And at the time, it was important to be in LA. I don't think it's that important now. There's an incredible industry right here in this town and in these environs and what Philip is doing in Vermont and in New York. So I think that to start your business, it really starts with you, and I'd like to ask everybody to think about one thing for just a second. This is a little off the wall, but imagine yourself at 5 or 7 years old, and you're playing, and what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you drawing pictures? Are you writing pretend stories? Are you reading stories to your friends? Are you playing with the camera? What are you doing that you really, really love? And I guarantee you, that is what you have been given as a gift. And that is what, throughout your life, if you go back to that and you do what you love and you do it with conviction and just meet other people that are going to elevate you along the way, you will succeed because you're meant to succeed. Those are your gifts. And you almost have an obligation to follow that. And a lot of us get sidetracked in wanting to make a lot of money, wanting to win an Academy Award. No, I'm not going to make that film because nobody's going to want to buy it. But if it's in your heart and you want to talk about that story, then you really should do it. So I think the boundaries are disappearing. The internet has changed the game. We were talking about that earlier. You started 20 years ago wanting to do one thing, went on the internet, and here you are. You're a pioneer. You really are a pioneer. So what's the next goal, the next hurdle for all of us? That's very exciting. And I think that you can collaborate with people on both coasts. You can collaborate with people internationally. And as you said, it's very important to actually go to film festivals, go to conventions. Try to get to NAB if you can to see what's happening on the backside of everything. Go to the Berlin Film Festival and watch these amazing movies that come from all over the world that you can see. When I'm there, when I go, I spend 10 days and I watch 3 to 4 movies every day for 10 days. I'm exhausted at the end of it, but that gives me enough energy to take me through to the next year. And so I think we all have something very much in common in this room. We love creativity, whatever end of it you're in. And even those of you who say, well, I'm not creative, I just work with the budgets. You're creative because you have to understand the creative process in order to do a budget. Have I gone way off topic? The bottom line is, if you're creating a business, it doesn't matter where you are. If you can't get to LA and if you don't want to move to LA, do it from here. but go places where you are going to meet people who are involved in that industry there.
You can't be sitting in your house and get discovered.
No.
Right? You're going to have to get out there a little bit.
Right.
Clemence, do you want to talk to that a little bit?
There's only one thing I'd like to talk about is that, I always see things through my little mountain, which is the theaters. And it's true, Netflix and Amazon, when they came and they were their big money, they changed completely the business. And now if you feel that you can become a filmmaker and have a successful theatrical film, it's going to be super hard because there's less and less opportunities, less and less art houses that are going to challenge their audience by showing adventurous film or foreign films or documentaries that are really heartbreaking. And that is really, really sad. And unfortunately, that comes from the fact that Netflix and Amazon have decided not to purchase those films anymore. If you go on Netflix, you try to look at foreign films, you have, a handful of them. They used to be extremely generous, give a lot of money to distributors so that the distributors could actually release those films because you never make money in theaters, or rarely. So that's, it's great that actually there is, of course, an opportunity for filmmakers to do maybe more content with Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. But at the same time, it does have this double-edged sword where you have less opportunities to make movies that are being shown on the big screens, I think.
Yeah, I think we're in a moment of transition a little bit that hasn't quite figured itself out. Go ahead.
I just want to comment on that. I've been working on a documentary now. This will be the 4th year, and we're ready now finally to go into post on it. And I'm thinking about this theatrical hurdle myself. So what I've done is I have amazing sponsors that have become interested in the film because of the content. It's about a wounded Marine who is an amazing young man who overcomes everything. So it's a positive film about courage and perseverance. But some of the sponsors have offered to help provide funding for screenings in theaters so that we can actually show the film the way it's meant to be shown. And so there is a possibility of getting sponsorship.
Absolutely. That's the thing. You have to think outside the box. This traditional vision of theatrical release and then going to Netflix and on Amazon, it's over. But there are so many ways, indeed, to think of it outside the box. And I don't know if it's off topic, but community screenings, tons of community screenings. If your film has a topic that will interest a community, it's always a good thing. So whether you do it with a distributor or if you do it on your own, which would require a tremendous amount of time and effort for you, but that's possible. I have a friend who had a film and she saw this. She showed her films in 35 festivals, and actually so there was no distribution involved. She did the whole thing on her own. She would go to festivals, do Q&A, and actually sell her DVDs. During the Q&A, she would show the Q&A, the DVD, and because it was a topic that was, it was a LGBT topic with a very nice and uplifting message. People were really, there's no better time to sell your DVD than after the screening, where people are really enthusiastic about it. So that's an idea for thinking outside the box of a.
Nancy, do you want to talk about that a little bit, about the ways that filmmakers can use a festival like IFFBoston to
Definitely.
Market and promote their film?
I think that it's really important to use festival screenings as an opportunity to engage audiences and have them follow you on social networking. It's a good way to develop your social networking, which will be how you keep people updated about what is going to happen with your films. The larger your networks are, that helps to get distributors to take notice as well, and helps you in the future when you start doing things like fundraising for your future projects. There are a lot of really great social networking fundraising sites like Seed and Spark that have a lot of great advice on how to develop your social networking to really take advantage of that. But like, you really do have to do a lot of footwork, and it is good to be on the ground and in an audience, sitting in a room with people and asking them to follow you on Twitter or Facebook or on Instagram, and then keeping them really engaged with the progress of your films, especially if they have subjects that are really close to your heart and their heart, and to keep them updated. And, you know, when it goes to network, if your documentary goes to PBS, that you get a decent amount of viewership, that will help you in the future to develop, you know, ways of getting revenue for your film. But like, don't discount that, you know, going to smaller festivals will help you out. It will definitely put you in front of people. And this connection is more important than just the online connection. Because if you can look someone in the eye, I think that it really helps to connect them to you and be interested in what you do in the future as a creative person.
Thank you. I was so busy listening. I was like, we're not thinking about the next question. But yeah, go ahead, chime in while I think.
I'm going to put on, I see that my role on this panel is going to be the hard-nosed pragmatist. I can just tell. Because personally, as a filmmaker, and this has been my whole, I think, challenge since I started many years ago, is there were three things I wanted to do. One was to tell a wonderful story, a significant story, sometimes that was not told by others. And the second thing, which is huge, is to be able to remunerate the people working on the film, whether it's the actors or the crew or whomever. And this is very important, I think, because you have to make a living. We can't merely talk about the art of it without talking about the practicality of it. And so then the third thing, which ties back into everything we've been discussing, is how do you know, that ugly word, how do you monetize it so that, in fact, if you're defer paying your actors, later they can get a decent wage out of this, or whomever. And so I think the journey for a lot of filmmakers is to get to the point where your, whether it's through festivals or whatever, is to get your film distributed, or have it picked up by HBO, or your film is actually funded, whether not just series, but film is funded by those big guys in the sky there, Netflix, Amazon, because they are also funding films, so that it's possible for people to make a decent living wage, a career out of it. And it's tough. I will tell you that doing at least television and not being in Los Angeles is not very easy. Documentary, much more, I think, doable, because most of the decisions and the writers' rooms and everything are out there, and the agents and whatnot who can connect you. I just needed to add that, because all these things are the tough business pieces you confront when you're here and not there, and you're trying. We are in an incredibly transitional period, where as much as we love to talk to one another face to face, I went to this Harvard Business School thing, and someone described how they'd made their wonderful film, and they wanted to get followers for it, and they wanted to be able to make a little pittance back, and so they showed little segments of the film, 1 minute of it on Snapchat. Remember this story? And said, if you want to see more of our film, pay for us on Vimeo. And, you know, this is how they managed to recoup some of their money. And one of the Harvard Business School, actually from HBO, told that story. Because there are all of these important social media ways to, including all the crowdfunding, that it makes it possible to again, get your money back and pay people. So...
Well, let's go on that theme. Other ideas of, you know, sort of how do we make our living actually doing the things that we love, instead of it being a side project that actually drains money from our account, which can often happen, right?
Can I add some bleakness to what you said? Well, you just mentioned the fact that, one way of making money is to be distributed. It doesn't necessarily, it's not the case sometimes, The harsh reality is sometimes your film gets picked up by a distributor, a small distributor, someone who's passionate and everything, but doesn't have necessarily the money to pay a big MG. And it's more and more the case. So I'm working for very small studios, micro studios, and we do mostly very independent film, US indie films, documentaries, a lot of American documentaries, and a lot of foreign films. And we don't pay much as a minimum guarantee, as an upfront. And then, all the expenses is being recouped before you can get some royalties. And it can take more than 1 year, more than 2 years. Sometimes it never gets recouped. So it's very sad, and it's very hard for me to say that, because it's my business, and we are all trying to make money out of it, and it's extremely hard. And we are all, cutting costs everywhere to make sure that at the end there is a little bit of money. But it's not easy for small distributors. Now, big studios have often, people, investment that, flow money to them. That helps. But sometimes it helps for a certain amount of years, and then poof, they disappear. You have a lot of distribution company that cannot last more than 3-4 years because they got a big chunk of money, and then they're just losing money all the time. So
what are the ways then that filmmakers are making money? How are they making a living? How are they eating and paying for rent?
Maybe you have the answer.
One example is I have a friend who 10 years ago started making a documentary film, and she finished it, and it's good. But she was about to give up because she wasn't making any money, and like many of us, it had taken a long time. And then all of a sudden, she just kept pushing. And she got one PBS screening in a local market, and then she did an interview with PBS in that local market, and the other PBS stations saw it, and then ABC just interviewed her because they're promoting the topic. And she got another PBS screening. And what she also did was the advice of going to communities and doing community screenings. And I helped her design it, and she ordered 1,000 DVDs. So she has 1,000 DVDs, and now she does community screenings, and she sells her DVDs. And because it's a micro budget, she's starting to make a little bit of money back. And I think PBS is enjoying it. Vimeo, and there's a lot of VOD services where you can make a little bit of money. I think we would love to know more about how do you meet distributors. If you're going to these huge Sundance film festivals, what are the distributors looking for when they go to the festivals?
So the traditional way is that the distributor goes to a festival that has a market, like Cannes, Berlin, Toronto, but also, Tribeca, New York Film Festival, Rendezvous with French Cinema, if you are interested in French films, new directors, new films for young filmmakers, and also some big local festival like the San Francisco, Seattle, as I mentioned, and often we connect with a sales agent. So the sales agent has already seen the film, or has bought the film and has helped produce the film, or just bought the film once done, and they're pitching the film to us. So that's the traditional way. But so there are plenty of sales agents. There are actually, it's funny, but a lot of sales agents are French, and some are selling American films. I just bought a film called, Film Movement bought a film called Oh Lucy, which is an American indie film, but it was sold by L Driver, which is a French sales agent. So that's funny to see that. There are, for documentaries, you have also very distinctive sales agent, American sales agent, like Submarine, for instance, that are very good, and they are doing very good at selling their films, and film sales company also. So those are, you have to identify sales agents. You have to check talk to them in festivals also, because they are also in festivals. And that's how you can get, that's how you can, your film can be purchased by a sales agent. And then that's when the good thing is that the sales agent is selling your film to the world. So your prospect of getting money, not only for the States, but for every part of the world. So that's a good thing. But you also have the other way, the way that the ballsy way, where you actually contact the distributor you want to work with. So, it's very delicate. You don't want to be too much of a bully, because your film is not going to be watched. But if you have connection, there's always ways to connect with a distributor. And talking directly to the distributor who is attending a festival is a very good way. I just, sometimes I go to film festival, I really love the film, and I would try to connect with the filmmaker directly, and then show this film to the team, and we decide. So there's many ways, but I think those are the main ways.
And making those connections at an event can be something that could be fruitful down the line. If not for this film, you've now established this kind of connection. So for the next film that you're doing, maybe you even contacted an earlier stage, I'm working on this or something, and building an audience, right? Because a distributor, I would assume, wants to see that you have an audience.
A good thing for a distributor is to see that the film has won jury awards. We love when films win jury awards, so that's a good indicator.
And a lot of filmmakers are using crowdfunding at an early stage, not just as a way of raising money for their films, but actually as a way of building their audience at an early stage, so that they can. There was a film, She's Beautiful When She's Angry, that did this, right? They got a lot of followers based on the film, which was about the feminist movement. Because they did a Kickstarter campaign and it was shared. And so before the film was even fully made, they already had all these sort of fans and followers that they could then connect with. And although, I think a lot of us tend towards the social media, I'm going to say that I'm going to go with what Peter Broderick says, which is have an email list for your film, for your company, for your business, because you cannot contact people on Facebook as easily as I've done. When I did the Kickstarter campaign a couple years ago for New England Film, we have, at this point, 9,000 fans or followers in our group. Well, I can't email all those people. That's not allowed through Facebook. So how can I alert them? I can post something in my group. How many people do you think actually see that? A small fraction of that. And this is why I said before, post on the jobs page, don't post it on the Facebook group, because actually the only people that see that are your friends in the group, which is just not that helpful. So creating your own email list through MailChimp or one of those services, which is MailChimp, I think is free under 2,000 subscribers. So, once you get past that point, you can look into other options, or you can start paying because it's maybe worth it. So that's one thing. I do want to open it up to the audience too, unless I want to give everyone a chance to. Do you want to add to anything before we open it up?
I'm so cynical. That's my problem. The only thing I just wanted to say, I agree with you about the social media, and I had the good fortune to just come from a few, I guess it was 4 or 5 days ago. It seems like forever ago, where a group of social media consultants were all talking about how to help people with their film and video projects. And they did agree that you begin, which was kind of an eye-opener for me, with a pre-production. Start in pre-production of your project. Start shooting whatever, videos of casting, right? Imagine this, it's like a reality TV show. We're going to show you casting, and one of these people is going to be the lead. You can even vote on it. And one of the interesting distinctions they made was between engagement and sharing. And your whole goal is to get folks engaged. And how do you do that? You poll them. You ask them to come back and respond to things that you're doing. And this was really out of the box for me, because I'm thinking during pre-production, oh it's like just see if it can make our budget, never mind all this other stuff. So, and then just continue that and continue to get followers, continue to get people to share whatever you're saying about your films or your series or whatever you're doing, so that the point at which, whether it's going to be in a festival, you're going to put pieces of it on Vimeo or YouTube or both. Again, I'm sorry, I'm thinking much more as you can tell, I'm not thinking theater. That's not where my head is right now. Begin it really early.
That makes sense. And there's a lot. Henry Jenkins has written a lot about the participatory culture and how media is not a top-down industry as much as it was years ago, where it's like the executive. I mean, there still is some of that, but fans want to decide. They want to feel like they have a part in deciding the story, and so that is definitely where things are headed also. And if you figure out some way of engaging with that, that's a really interesting idea. Can we open it up to? Are there questions in the audience? Yeah. Wait, are you asking if there's a market to produce fake news? Is anyone interested or thinking about producing fake news?
Okay. I'll take this for 1 second. There's a lot of things like The Onion, the Borowitz Report. Probably a lot of people here already subscribe to. One of my favorites is Randy Rainbow. It's not exactly fake news. It's insanely funny musicals, commentary on what's going on in the White House. So if you're of a certain political persuasion, I think there is a market for a lot of this. Just I don't know how many like millions of shares you see of all the Saturday Night Live encounters in the White House with Alec Baldwin and like Darth Vader, Bannon, and whatnot.
I wouldn't classify that as fake news, as more of satire. Sure, there's space for satire. I think the concept of fake news and the kind of content that we're driving here is maybe not relevant, and unless you're making a documentary specifically about fake news, which would be great. So that would be a good thing to tackle. Why people can't distinguish fact from fiction. That would be awesome. I would watch that.
I think that's an interesting question. So, I mean, this is something that we think. So, the question is there some what's the market in creating clickbait or sort of trying to draw an audience in? And I think clickbait is a little bit different than something like fake news, because you're trying to be really savvy in how you position what you're writing about. I mean, it's something that we think about on New England Film, right? How do we title our articles so that someone will find it in a search? And I tend to be more, I have all this integrity, which really gets in the way of clickbait. But, it is smart to think about when you're building a website for a film or you're generating a blog for your film, what is it, who's your audience and how are they going to find you? What are they searching for? And how can you build that audience based on that? Or if you're doing a business, right? If you have a business on you're an acting coach or something and you've got a blog, what are the types of posts that you're creating that are actually going to draw people to you and learn about your business and what you're doing?
These are kind of basic concepts, though. Like, headlines are there to grab your attention. What you're doing is essentially creating attention for what you you are trying to get attention for. Clickbait is a very like weighted term. It has a lot of connotations about a falseness. And sure, there's a falseness in advertising, but it really is about our responsibility as viewers, as readers, to be cognizant that, yeah, people are trying to sway us all the time. And yeah, we're all trying to sway you too. I'm trying to make sure that more films get made in this community. So that's my agenda. Everybody does have an agenda, but does that agenda serve more than me? I hope so. So really, that's what you should be kind of more concentrating on, is how does this agenda better serve a larger portion of people rather than a small portion of people?
Yeah, it's not very useful, honestly, to create something that gets someone to your website and then it's like, what the hell? I mean, that's just not, you're not building an audience if you do something like that. You want someone to get to your website and be like, oh my God, there's so much more here that I can now know about.
A cousin to that is when I was at the studio, we were always having discussions about the difference between putting bodies in seats in the first week and keeping them coming back. And there's always a fine line between truth in advertising. So when you're doing a marketing campaign on your film, I think one thing you always need to avoid, this is just my opinion, but you always need to avoid misinforming the audience about what they're going to see when they go in the theater just to get that first week. We're talking theaters now. Because you might get them in the seats, but then you're just going to get a bad exit interview, and they're going to tell their friends not to go see it. Because we've lied about the film. So I think it's not just integrity, it's also a marketing decision. And in terms of a cousin to the clickbait is pay per click, which is an advertising scenario that has gotten a lot of negativity attached to it lately because there was so much fraud involved with pay per click. So you have to be very careful with pay per click.
Back there? Yeah. How do you feel about small festivals sending screeners to distributor friends is the question.
Absolutely. That's how, I have a few festival friends, and I really appreciate when they think, oh, I have a film for you. And, it will I feel totally obligated to watch the film in its entirety, and yes, that's absolutely totally fine.
Oh, well, I think that the perceived unfairness of that is, sure, if you're on the receiving end of that and you don't get sort of preferential treatment, but the fact is that most of what is seen is based on referral in a lot of ways. Even the way that word of mouth is built about films, you're hoping that the first audiences that come to see your film will continue to endorse that film to other people and generate more activity. So if you can get somebody that knows a distributor to watch your film, would you not also use that opportunity? It really is about trying to find those opportunities to get your film viewed by people who can help it.
I think it is one of those things that comes up a lot with festivals is that, so many filmmakers are submitting and paying fees to get into festivals, and then the odds are so small at a lot of these festivals, right? And then ultimately, festivals often curate their collection to some extent. They always choose from the pool of applicants, but they also choose films based on they attend other festivals, and they curate part of their festival that way. And it is one of those things that feels unfair. And I think it comes down to, in my view, it comes down to being ethical about who watches the films on the jury side. Is there a competent jury sort of watching the films and evaluating the films? Is it more than one person? And are you being honest about what the sort of ratio is? You wouldn't want to have a festival that literally had no spots for the submission pool. What would be the point of taking submissions? You want to follow on that? Yeah, what do you want to say? Oh, oh, okay. Did we misunderstand the question maybe? Because I think it was,
I think
you're
that's an
saying,
absolutely great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your reputation is on the line.
yeah, so to repeat what Philip just said, the idea of, I'm a festival director and you're my friend, so I'm going to forward this to a distributor. But Philip's point is, I misunderstood, I think, the question, but the point of that is that, in that case, that's going to not last very long, because as soon as you send a recommendation that's like really off the mark, you're going to not have the credibility factor anymore. Yeah.
I would trust the festival director to tell his friends, I don't think this is a film that deserves distribution, or, that's really important, that I would trust the festival director to really only for the good films.
I wanted to talk about an experience I had 2 years ago. We ran this Flicks for Chicks film festival, very small. It was in Cambridge. Our goal was to get emerging filmmakers to make shorts under 10 minutes with a woman as a central character and with a woman at least one woman in a lead creative role. And our process, this may have nothing to do with your question, but I think this is pretty typical because, again, I've been a judge of other festivals, quite a few of them, is films come in. They're coming in, as H.264s or whatever, we're watching those films on a television. And we are, the first round, if it's a lot of films, which was not true of our festival because it was brand new, if there's a lot of films coming in, the first tier is of judges, could be interns, it could be whatever. And then there's a electronic judging form, and then you say, okay, should this be recommended, or should we pass on it? And then there's the question of, is it award worthy or not? And so as they ascend up, and I cannot speak for how this other your festivals or however you do it, I can only tell you that this is used a lot. And so you're going to get very junior people, then you're going to get, the higher level ones, and then maybe the top 10 films will be looked at by someone who's really a big industry decision maker, or maybe even 5. And then they will say, okay, well, this will be the one. But it's tough. I mean, if you're having a big festival with a lot of, and that's the process, that's very tough.
And it's a numbers game, so you get thousands of submissions. You have to manage that number of submissions, right, from the festival's perspective as well. Vinka, you had a question? Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question so we have it on recorded. But the question is, so there was an article written about how festivals are making money on submissions, but then in fact 70% of the slots or something like that are actually already taken by curation instead of the open pool through that. Mm-hmm.
I guess that's me.
Nancy, not to be put on the spot or anything, geez.
70% in advance is a pretty high number. We curate a lot of our festival. We also look at probably about 1,500 submissions a year, mostly shorts. I watch most of them, or at least a part of every single film that comes in.
I believe that too.
I do, because I don't really like anybody else looking at anything. Because honestly, I'm afraid that someone's going to miss something. So I'm pretty terrible about getting other people to do it. There's a handful of people that I actually trust to view things. I am extremely selective about who those people are. And that is because I think that a lot of the viewing process for a lot of festivals, a lot of good films slide between their fingers, and that makes me crazy. We can't show everything. We do have like about 110 slots for the festival. So you have a 10-to-1 chance getting into our festival. But you have a pretty good chance, and Brian has something to say about it. No, why don't you go ahead?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. That, you know, just because you see it at a festival, it also might be a submission in your.
And we're also balancing a program. So we still want people to come to the festival. You kind of have to give them a little bit of eye candy. You have to have some pillars for that tent to attract people to come in, and then kind of say, hey, look, there's these films that you may not know anything about. And so you kind of have to balance that. You're going to have a few big name things or things that attract attention, or else the smaller films aren't going to be shown. It is an ecosystem that you're trying to create with every program.
Orange shirt. Okay, so you're in post-production on a short, but the feedback you're getting is that it really should be used as a proof of concept instead of marketed as a short film or released as a short film on its own. What do you do?
You know, that's a funny thing, because in the last year I've met a number of filmmakers who are making proof of concept shorts. That's it. They're saying, I can't make this whole film, but I'm going to choose some scenes from it that really crystallize the theme, and they're presenting it as such. And I think that's a great idea, because it's kind of along the same idea of a sizzle reel, only better, if you know what I mean by that. You really get, that's a great way to attract investors. Maybe that's not your question, but I can't talk about the festival circuit the way I think Nancy can.
I can't really talk about proof of content
right.
As much as maybe you'd like. I look for shorts that seem complete concept and would fit in a package that would be appealing to an audience and to myself, ultimately. So, I think it's great as a calling card for filmmakers. Shorts are a good way to show that you can work the form. But I view shorts very much as like the poetic form of film. Like, you have to use an economy of visual style, sound style, and concept. It's a very different animal than a full-length feature. And if basically you're making it to be a calling card for a larger feature, it has to stand alone as a short to be seen. There are many films that have gone on from the short form. Even Oh Lucy, which Clemence has mentioned, started as a short. That is a very good short. But you should have a very complete vision of what your short should be. And, it is a good opportunity to pitch it as we have a longer form feature of this in mind as well, and how you can fill it out. Your film should be as long as your film needs to be. This is sort of the issue people often have. They don't know how to edit. Your film may actually only be 60 minutes long. It would be a better film than the 90-minute film you made, or the 2 hours and 30-minute film you made based on Metropolis or M. And that's okay. That was your vision. It was someone else's vision first. But try again.
There was an 8-hour film at the Berlinale 2 years ago. I kept the wristband. I survived this film. It was 8 hours long. It was awful. But you want to talk about Oh Lucy?
Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of publicity. Oh Lucy is actually going to open in at the Kendall Square March 9th. There, I said it. It's great. And the producer is going to come to do a Q&A. So on Friday. It's a story that takes place in two countries, Japan and the West Coast, San Diego. And I'm just going to say it's kind of a midlife crisis that takes the whole world for this woman to find herself.
I only saw the short, and that only happened in Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay, so the short was just Japan, and then it was expanded. Now, do you know the story of how the film went from short to feature?
I think it's just because the short was so good, got a lot of awards, a lot of recognition, and then they were able to get funding. And the good surprise is that Josh Hartnett has been hired to be in the film, in the feature film. So it's also the comeback of Josh Hartnett in an indie film, which is interesting.
Nice.
Back to proof of concept really quickly. I think most people that make shorts, at least the ones that I've met, have aspirations of making longer films and getting their films sold. So in a way, every short is a proof of concept. I think the most important thing is the story. You still have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and give the audience what they, have them leave being happy that they saw it. Your style, the way you tell your story, the way you film your story, and all of the elements within that story all comprise your proof of concept. So I would think every short, if you think about it, is really your proof of concept as a filmmaker. So I think the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, so in some senses, the short answer is probably that it's fine if it's a proof of concept, as long as it's also a short that stands alone and is powerful in and of itself. Yeah.
I think all films, regardless of length, should be proof of concept. If you don't have a strong concept, you don't have a future as a storyteller. So that's mean, but sorry. But, you should definitely just make the strongest short you can and make sure that it's solidly made and not just like by the end of it, you're like, oh, well, there's going to be more. It really should stand alone. It needs to stand alone.
And just to add something also, a short can have a career also with a distributor. Like Film Movement is always adding a short to every DVD that they produce. So the short has to be somehow related to the topic or anything, but there is always a short. So that's, a good way to also solicit. And I'm not sure, I think there are other distributors who do that.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a clarification about the whole kind of, since I'm supposedly the person here who wants to talk about script writing, I think if you are writing a short, it does have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And often a really phenomenal short has a twist ending or some resolution that you don't forget. And that is, I know when I judge shorts, which is most of what I do judge, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for something really strong at the end that kind of wraps that whatever tension, whatever challenge the character has faced in it. The proof of concept thing can be like that. But it also, and again, this gets into story structure, if your goal is to, I think, get someone very excited about this world that's in the short and the characters in it, then there is also the possibility, please forgive me for this, what we jokingly refer to as the French film, where at the end, it's not, you know what I'm going to say, right? It's not exactly resolved. It could be this way or perhaps that way. And so, right, and they're all naked, right? Anyway, and anyway, I'll stop right there. But I just wanted to clarify that script point.
Yeah, I don't know. We're going to get to all these questions. Over there in the... Let's move on to the party. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As actors, how do you make it work in New England as an actor?
Oh gosh, I really do want to jump on this a little bit because I think it is a huge challenge to be an actor here and be doing more than background work. And so I have a lot of interns in our organization. I encourage, and I say this to them in relation to making their own films as filmmakers, be involved in student films so that work toward having, as part of your student work, having some demo reel coming out the other end. Be selective about those scripts. See that there's an opportunity for you to really play a great character in there. Try to always be checking in with all boards like NewEngland.com, or I don't know if you're after SAG or not, the after SAG hotline, all these resources for actors to go to as many auditions as you can, but it's tricky, without constantly going to New York or having an agent, etc. That is my yeah.
So this is a little bit of a revolutionary idea, and I know we already have enough directors, but if I was advising an actor, I would say, can't you find a community of people who want to work on a film and you can make a film together? Because one of the things that I feel like for actors and actresses that's just so hard and demoralizing is that you're constantly on the end of like, please give me the part, please give me the part. And it's such a crap position to be in all the time. Like, you could make a film. I mean, you could make a film that's as good as a lot of the films that we've been seeing. Trust me. So, yes, I'm a little bit. I feel like that. Did anyone see the film Exit Through the Gift Shop, where Banksy decides, like, maybe I shouldn't be telling everyone to be an artist? I feel like maybe this is bad advice, so I don't know if you should really take it. But is there some opportunity for you to, if you're not directing, but to find collaborators and build a project that you have some more control and agency in? Because not to say that, I think this is also good advice, find smaller, lower budget projects that you can kind of jump in and get a demo reel started, but I'm just such a self-starter. To me, it's hard to say, like, just hope you get something. Theater, yeah, sure. Yes, the 48-hour film festival. I've done it 3 times. Love it. Yeah. Join a team. You join a team on they do it in Providence, they do it in Boston, they do it in New York. I've done it in each of those cities. It's great fun. You write, direct, and edit a film in 48 hours, and teams come together, and at the end of the 48 hours, for better or worse, you've got a short. Right, and it shows on a theater locally. Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And there are awards. Mm-hmm. Yeah, question? Oh, geez. Who's here from Emerson? Well, I think that's, I think that film school is about building connections, just like any of the kinds of things that we're doing. And one of the things that you get from coming to a place like Emerson is entry into this network this community of other filmmakers and producers and having gone to Emerson, I did the LA program, and they were amazing about kind of getting you connected with alumni. There's a lot of alumni that are really supportive, and so I think for that, it's hard because college education and master's degrees have gotten so expensive. And yes, there are a lot of ways for you to learn just by watching YouTube videos, right? Or classes online. And that is effective too, but it's not bringing you that network. So I think to some extent that's part of what you're getting. Does anyone want to answer that, or is that sufficient?
I can give somewhat the other side of that too. I think it's awesome to be able to go to college and to be able to go to film school if you can, and you do make connections. But still at the end of it, you still have to network, and you have to actually get in there and start working on productions, because there's a lot. You'll have a great craft, and you'll learn that craft, but you won't really know the ins and outs of actually being on a set long term with other people. I never went to film school, and I didn't graduate from college. I was in college during the Vietnam War era, and or post-Vietnam War, and I left college my senior year in college because my husband didn't want to get drafted and wanted to choose his own way. That's a long-winded way of saying there are many ways of getting into this. I think film school is invaluable, but there's also something pretty great about loading wood in the pickup truck for the grip crew, or pitching in with the camera crew, or just watching as an intern. Get coffee for people and watch. J.J. Kelly started out getting coffee for people and didn't say a word in the writer's room for almost 2 years, and then started giving them some good ideas. And pretty soon there he is, becoming an executive producer on TV series. So if you can't go to film school, don't be depressed about it. Just find another way of learning and getting in there and doing.
Definitely. Agreed.
Can I just also remark that you should have some life experiences?
Yeah.
Being in an academic setting all the time doesn't necessarily give you access
and making work
to
for
people.
School, right, is not the same thing as making work for a market.
Right.
So
especially as like actors, you really need to kind of diversify the crowd you're around. You need to observe other people in other walks of life. And those are the stories that you may end up telling. Without those experiences, you have a very narrow worldview and a narrow sense of empathy. And for you to express the humanity that film has the opportunity to actually engage in, live in the world. Do that. Go to school if you can, though. It's pretty cool. We'll meet a lot of people, but don't forget to live in the world. There are other people not like you, and it's important to understand that viewpoint too.
I'm so glad you said that. That was on my list of my pathetic notes I brought, which is one of the assignments that I give interns now is to take out your earbuds and get on public transit, go to a restaurant, go get a job as a waitress, get a job working as a gardener in the summer, go to an old age home and volunteer, go to a prison and read to prisoners, get yourself out in the world, because one of the things that there's nothing, we can talk about film school and do you know how to, do follow focus and all that crap, right? But if you don't have interesting stories to tell based on, and Nancy, I can't second that enough, about real life situations in the world, then all you're going to be doing is making little boring films about the little bubble that you live in as a filmmaker. Oh, let's make another film about a struggling filmmaker in LA and his girlfriend. No, I'm serious. I've seen 1,000 of this same film, or it's Williamsburg.
Please don't make
another
film about writer's block. Please.
Yes, that's another one.
Writer's block.
So in addition to the technical chops, which you can learn in film school, or you can also learn in programs like the program at AFI, or there is a program in Maine where you can do, that's a director's program, or editing, or special effects, whatever you want to learn about. I just cannot emphasize enough how important I think that is.
And just go see foreign films also. That will help you have a wider mind.
If you can't travel, foreign films are the best way to go.
Dan, how are we doing on time? Do we have time for some? We're at 8:45. Should we?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Just 2 seconds. For filmmakers who are aiming high and aiming at being present in big film festivals like Toronto, Sundance, which one? In Berlin sometimes. Amazon, after trashing the Amazon, I'm going to now do some kind of a good thing about Amazon is that they have a program. I don't know how long it's going to last, but they have so much money that they're actually giving money to films that are being selected in some sections. So you have premiere US dramatic, midnight movies. They get $150,000 if their film gets selected in that section. That was for Toronto, I think. Documentary premieres or US premiere, $120,000. And for world cinema, a little bit less, $5,000. That means that if a distributor is interested in your film, it will have to pay at least $150,000 or more, because you already will get, I mean, the right holder will already get $150,000. So that's good news. I don't know how long it's going to last, though. But.
I just wanted to give one tip before we leave, too. If you're interested in theatrical releases, one of the ways I learned a lot about distributors early on, I wanted to know who the competition was when I was working at the studio. I would go to AFM, I would go to the Cannes market. There's markets in addition to festivals. And if you go to the markets and you wander around the hall, don't try to sell your film to them during the market, because they're not there to buy films, they're there to sell. But you will see the posters, you will see what they're selling, and most distributors have an area of filmmaking that they specialize in, right? So you can tell a lot about a distributor by what's in their room and what the salespeople are selling. And that might be a way for you to make a list of 5 or 6 that you think are very viable for the kind of films you want to make. And if you have the time, just informally say, hey, who's your favorite sales agent? You know, and then they might say, well, and they'll give you a name really quick. They won't tell you how to get in touch with them because they don't want to get in trouble. But you can find that out. So that was just a little tip I wanted to give everyone before we left.
I think we have time for just maybe a couple more questions. In the back there, yeah. Grant money. Okay, so the question is, grants, how does it help you sort of organize your project and plan? It does help you organize your project. And then who are the ones that are really coming through as these are the projects that they seem to have a good return on? Is that? Okay. Anyone want to?
Locally for documentaries, LEF Foundation has a number of grants that they tend to give out, and the films that come out of those programs have been exemplar. They create great docs.
There's also Tribeca Film Institute does grants. Obviously, Sundance Institute does, has filmmakers work on their script, and they have all sorts of programs for filmmakers. You want to speak to that?
One aside, we started the Sundance Film Festival in major part with a $15,000 grant from the National Education Association. And so grants can be very valuable. We're working with the Bob Woodruff Foundation, and they're giving us some help in terms of providing us with media, and then we're going to turn around and actually donate money back to them. So there is no free lunch normally. You get a grant. There are things that you really should do in return for that grant, but I think you're absolutely right. Just research what's available in the type of films that you're making, and go ahead, go for it. Just apply. And it's going to take a long time for the money to come in. So
there's also Chicken and Egg, which is for features made by women, female filmmakers. And ITVFest, ITVS, are they still doing grants? Or that's PBS. Yeah.
This is, by the way, this is like a downer, I'm sorry. But ever since the Reagan administration, we have been seeing a steady attrition in funds for any kind of, certainly narrative and documentary as well. National Endowment for the Arts, I don't even know the statistics. National Science Foundation. When I first started out in this, we had excellent grants from both of those for different projects that funded us to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we had to write the grants. We had to, again, they were very educationally oriented. So, there was this is no risk. This is going to be fantastic. But, when you look at something like the Canadian Film Board, or you look at what's happening in England or in many other parts of the world, you see enormous government investment in the arts and as far as giving funding to filmmakers. And I would just like to say that this is a subject we hardly ever talk about in politics anymore, but it is time to start getting officials elected who value the arts and to start turning around that. And I'm not even sure how we begin to see more money allocated to those things, because as you know, right now the proposal is to get rid of Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and if anything, it's going the other way. So I would say, and again, for example, in New York State, there was, I think, a $5 million set aside for women's film projects last year. So there is the possibility also of trying to advocate for that in Massachusetts.
Sure. So one thing that I would say is just, so I interviewed a filmmaker, Jennifer Fox, recently, and she's a documentary filmmaker, and she just made the film The Tale that was at Sundance, and it was picked up by HBO. And when I interviewed her, I asked her about funding. How was she able to do this with The Tale? Because someone who's been in the documentary film world as a director for decades, to make a narrative feature is almost unheard of, with Laura Dern in it, and like a real budget. And she ended up getting funding from Game Changer Films, which is a for-profit company that invests in women filmmakers. But her comment was basically, I'm paraphrasing, but not if it was going to get funded, but how it was going to get funded. And she said that every single one of her projects she has funded in some different way. When there were international grants, she pre-sold and got grants and did that. If that's not going to work, then she finds some other means. I think that where I think you're right, Genine, is that the grants have been shrinking, and I have seen a lot of filmmakers spend a good amount of time in grants, and unfortunately, grants are like everything else, where if you have a connection to somebody, then you are going to get your grant seen, and you will see, chicken and egg, and a lot of these places, they're giving to the same people often, and it can be very demoralizing as a filmmaker to invest a lot of time in a grant process that doesn't go anywhere. One thing that I would suggest, if you were going to go down that road, is to start with one of the simpler applications at your state agency. They're very small grants, like the Rhode Island Council for the Arts has a $1,000 grant that they do. But if you get one of those grants, you get like a stamp of approval from the grant industry, and no one is going to give you a $100,000 grant when you have nothing to show for it. They can't trust you. It's just same thing with a nonprofit organization. All right, you have to have a substantial budget. The budget has to be sort of comparable of what you've been doing in the past. So you can start with something like that, and then once you are able to get those kinds of grants and referrals, it's going to help you, I think, on that path, if that's the way you decide to go. I want to get to people who haven't asked a question yet, but we'll have time also after to answer questions. Yeah. So Amazon actually, the question is how to get your work on Amazon and Netflix. Amazon actually has an open submission policy on their website, and you can simply submit a script or any of that. Netflix is a little bit more of a black box, so does someone want to speak to that?
They're hard to reach.
Yeah.
No, I actually looked into Amazon a couple years ago, and maybe it's changed, but I had copyright ownership issues with submitting my projects to Amazon and who's going to ultimately own the copyright for my material. But regarding Netflix, I had a very brief meeting with them a couple of days ago, and one of the things that I was shocked at, and this doesn't apply to everything, and I don't know a lot about it yet, but I was surprised by the fact that they were actually happy that I hadn't started cutting yet, and that I had raw footage, quite a bit of raw footage on something that I've been working on for about 10 years. And they seemed to think that that was actually pretty good. So I'll know more about that in the coming months. But look into Netflix, and they may not need to have a finished film or a finished project. I don't know, but that's what I got from one of the executives. Oh, we're glad you haven't started cutting. It looks like a great idea. We want to see what you've got.
All right, I think what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have a party. So anyone that wants to join us for the party, I want to, again, thank you guys all for coming tonight. And thank you to all of our panelists for taking the time to come here. Again, thank you to our sponsors, many of whom are here, Hunts and Vinca Jarrett, ITV Fest. And we will move on to the party, which is next door at Salvatore's. I want to just end with one thing, which is that I reread a study that was done about luck recently, about people who think of themselves as lucky. And one of the things that was really interesting about it is that this researcher found that people could actually become more lucky, or they could turn from unlucky to lucky. And the way that they discovered this worked was that people who were lucky were not necessarily looking for this path as a direct line path to what they wanted. They knew where they wanted to get, but they were kind of looking more around them and open to how things came their way in ways that were unexpected. And so that's my advice, to keep yourself open to things that you might not expect, and getting yourself out there is what brings you into those experiences where you actually start to become lucky. All right, thank you for coming, and I hope to see you guys at the party.